The Charboys Apprentice. It's half-term and Charles is busy following his daily rota and pottering around the house. His mother is at work. His big sister Emily stayed over at one of her friends and isn't expected back until the afternoon, and 11-year-old Samantha is playing on her games console. Charles only had to make one packed lunch whilst he prepared the family breakfast, and the mornings aren't quite so much of a rush since he doesn't have to leave for school this week. But on the downside, no school means he has to wear his corset beneath his housekeeping uniform as well as a full face of makeup. As usual, he quickly vacuums the landing and runs the hoover around his bedroom, his mother's bedroom and his sister's rooms. In spite of the fact his elder sister's not even been in the house since yesterday, her bedding still needs straightening and she's left her tights tangled up in her underwear again. After a quick tidy round, he pushes the hoover to Samantha's room where he knocks and enters. "Aren't you dressed yet?" he asked, finding her slumped on her bed in her pajamas and fully focused on her handheld console. "You haven't put anything out for me yet," she replied with raising her eyes from the screen. "It's the holidays." "I only put your clothes out on a school day," he reminded her. But knowing that Samantha would spend all day in her pajamas if she could, he opened her closet and asked if she wanted jeans or leggings. Following her instructions, he put out some leggings, some underwear, a pair of socks and a t-shirt for her, before quickly running the vacuum cleaner around. She tutted at the noise, and tutted again when he asked her to move so he could straighten her bedding. After quickly cleaning the family bathroom and the ensuite in his mother's bedroom, Charles carried the vacuum cleaner downstairs and parked it in the hallway. He grabbed a stiff brush from the cleaning cupboard and proceeded to sweep the stairs from top to bottom. Perched on his knees, he quickly and briskly swept every step, letting the dust fall onto the next one down. Samantha emerged from her room, fully clothed and carrying her console. "So, you got any plans today?" he asked. "Not really," she replied. "Apart from this," she added, raising the game's console which these days is seemingly glued to her hand. "You could give me a hand if you fancy," Charles suggested. "Nah," she bluntly replied. "Housework's for boys," she said as she went on her way. Charles often suggests one of his sisters give him a hand, but he knows they'll never say yes. It's just something he says when they seem to have plenty of spare time on their hands or appear bored. He doesn't mind that they decline. Doing all the housework isn't so bad, and with no school to work around, he should be done soon after lunch, then he'll have some time to himself. He continues sweeping the stairs when the doorbell rings. "Can you get that, Sammy?" he hollers. There's no reply. He sighs and descends the stairs, checking and straightening his apron as he passes the hallway mirror. Given the time of day, he fully expects the postman and hopes it's the regular one who won't gasp or stifle a snigger when faced with Charles in his full housekeeping uniform. "Mike." Charles gasps upon seeing his school friend stood at the door. All of Charlie's friends know he's learning to be a housekeeper and know not to call around unannounced. He'd rather they didn't catch him doing the housework and see him in his uniform, although all are aware what he has to wear. Hi Charlie," Mike meekly replied. My mum's here too." Behind Mike stands his mother, who greets Charles with a bemused grin. He invites them inside and shyly says that he's in the middle of his chores. "I gathered that," Mike's mother says as she looked Charles up and down. "You certainly keep the place looking spotless," she complimented as her beady eye scanned the hallway. "There's barely a speck of dust anywhere. The sideboard shines, the ornaments and photo frames are gleaming and precisely positioned on its shelves. The brass door and drawer handles look as if they've been recently polished." "Do you do it all yourself?" she asked. "Mostly," Charles replied. Samantha hollered through from the lounge and asked who was here. "Just Mike and Mrs. Peters," he replied, before turning his shy attention back to the visitors. "I was hoping to see your mother," Mrs. Peters said. "Is she in?" "She's at work," Charles replied, before stating when she'd be back. "Oh well, could you tell her we called?" "Course. And ask her to give me ring," she said. Charles nodded. There's something I'd like to run by her, she added as she sent a suspicious glance toward Mike. Okay. Charles replied. She and Mike left and Charles politely bid them farewell, before having a little panic. His hand rubbed his forehead as he grumbled, why did they have to turn up? Mike, along with most other people Charles knows, is fully aware that he has to wear makeup and a frock whilst doing his chores, and a significant few have seen him. It's not as unusual as it may seem, since plenty of house husbands have been frocked, and that includes some of his friends' fathers, but it's not common for someone who's still at high school. Charles faces his reflection and wonders what Mike must have thought. It wouldn't be so bad if it was just a frock and apron. It's the face full of foundation, the sandy eyeshadow and brown eyeliner, the mascara coating his lashes and the nutty red lipstick that's most startling about his appearance. Normally he only wears full makeup on the weekends and just wears lipstick on a school day, although he removes it before school, but since it's the half-term break, it's full makeup every day until his daily chores have been completed. He returned to sweeping the stairs and worried about Mike gleefully telling all and sundry about Charlie's appearance. He cleaned the hallway, lounge, dining room, and utility room. He put a load of washing on before making Samantha some lunch and cleaning the kitchen afterwards. He had a little time to himself whilst he waited for the washing machine to complete its cycle before emptying it, separating it, and putting it to dry, and by 2 p.m. he could finally change into his civvies for a few hours until supper time, when it's back to the grind for a couple of hours. He removes his makeup and breathes a sigh of relief as his own face emerges. He unfastens his apron, unbuckles his shoes and unbuttons his frock. He pulls off his pop socks and checks them for ladders before dropping them in either the bin or laundry basket, and clad in his panties and corset, chooses something normal to wear. It's too much faff to remove his corset only to don it again a few hours later. Wearing his corset all day isn't as bad as it sounds. Saturdays are the worst when he's not worn it all week. Sundays aren't much better, but in the school holidays, when he gets plenty of time to get used to it, he almost forgets it's there, almost. Samantha is still playing her video games and Charles joins her for some two-player action. Despite the fact his morning chores are done, he still finds himself fetching drinks and snacks for his sister and clearing up after her. Charles doesn't wish he was a girl, but he does envy them. They've got a whole world of opportunity ahead of them, whilst boys have little more than menial jobs and housework. His mother arrives home from work at the usual time and he makes her a cup of tea and offers to fix a snack. She declines the snack. Mike and his mum called round this morning, Charles said. She asked if you'd call her, he added. Oh, what did she want? His mother asked. Dunno, he replied. I wish she hadn't brought Mike though. I hate it when my friends see me in my uniform, he added as he glanced at the time. It won't be long before he's back in uniform and back to his chores. Have you seen Emily today? His mother asked. Nope, he replied. His mother sent her a text to find out if she'd be home for supper, then she contacted Mrs. Peters and spent ages chatting. By the time their lengthy call had ended, Charles was back in his housekeeping frock and was applying his makeup when his mother entered and told him that she'd just been chatting to Mike's mother. What did she want? Charles asked in between applying his mascara. She'd read the article in Female First and wanted to talk about getting Michael trained up. Really? Charles gasped. His mother nodded. She's popping round later, so if you don't mind, could you stay in uniform for a little longer tonight? Yeah, I suppose, he sighed. And make sure you put a clean apron on. Okay, he said as she hovered over him and perused his selection of lipsticks. Wear this one, she said. I'm not keen on that one, he replied. It's too bright, he added as his mother removed the lid and wound up the candy pink column. It's nice, his mother insisted. Charles restated his opinion. I know, love, but when you're grown up with a wife of your own, she'll expect you to wear what she wants, not what you want. She might not even want me to wear makeup at all. Charles optimistically replied. Maybe so. But until then, you'll wear what I want, his mother stated as she handed him the candy pink lipstick. Charles frowned as he took it. As far as he's concerned, it's too pink and too glossy, but his mother thinks otherwise, and obediently, he applied it. She left and he resumed his duties, sorting, folding, and ironing the day's laundry before taking it upstairs and putting it away. Emily returned home and complimented his lipstick, saying it was very fashionable. Thanks, he hesitantly replied, before cautiously asking her to separate her knickers from her tights and if she could put them in her laundry basket rather than just tossing them in the general direction. She said she'd try. Thanks, he said, although he didn't have high hopes. After helping his mother to prepare and serve supper, he did the dishes and cleaned the kitchen before mopping the floor. What time's Mrs. Peters coming? He asked. She should be here in an hour or so, his mother replied, before asking him to open a bottle of Red to Breathe as well as putting a bottle of white on ice in the dining room. And print off a copy of your current rota, and fetch your folder of fact sheets down, she added, before reminding him to put on a clean pressed apron. Charles did as asked, laying out wine glasses, nibbles, napkins and side plates. He doesn't like it when his mother entertains because she likes to have him serve them. She makes sure his hair and makeup is perfect, that his apron is clean and pressed and that the bow is neatly tied with even wings and tails. Charlie, you've laddered your socks, she noticed. I know, but it's my last pair. I've only got Pellarin ones, he humbly replied. Well, they'll have to do, she replied, specifying a pair with frilly lace around the cuffs. Which ones? Charlie asked, since he has both knee and ankle socks like that. Mike isn't coming too, is he? I don't know, his mother replied, before sending him to change his socks. Charlie donned a pair of white Pellarin knee socks with an inch of frilly lace trim around the cuffs. He made sure the patterns were perfectly straight and the tops level, before donning his black Mary Janes and returning downstairs. That's better, his mother said as she inspected him. I do like that candy pink lipstick, she smiled. Charles gulped. Next to his grey frock, white apron, and plain white Alice band, his bright pink lips really stand out. Charles is convinced that his friend Mike is going to proper take the piss out of him if he sees him like this. Before long the doorbell rings and Charles is sent to answer it. He takes a deep breath before opening the door. Thankfully it's just Mrs. Peters. He invited her in. Thank you, Charles, she said. Still in uniform, I see. Yes, he replied before taking her coat and leading her to the dining room. Marie. Francine. How nice to see you. Blah blah blah, they sat and chatted. Charles poured the wine. Francine thanked him, as did his mother, before she gestured with her hand. Charles knew what the gesture meant, go but don't leave. He stands by the door, feet close together, hands gently clasped in front and eyes facing forwards. One of the fact sheets his mother had put together says that a servant should stand silent and still, looking at nothing in particular and listening to no one in particular. He mustn't allow himself to daydream, nor should he fidget or otherwise draw attention to himself. His sole duty is to await instruction. Standing still and waiting is easy. Not listening and avoiding daydreaming, not so much. Charles' ears are open as Francine tells his mother that she'd read the recent magazine article about Charlie which got her thinking about Michael's future. He'll do quite well in his exams, I expect. He'll go on to do A-levels and possibly university too, but that doesn't alter the fact that when he's grown up and married, he's unlikely to be the breadwinner and he'll need some good practical housekeeping skills. Francine explained that her husband didn't have a clue about housework and even after all these years, he struggles to keep on top of it all. I've talked to him about getting a nice housekeeper's frock to encourage him, but he'd refuse to wear it. He does wear his tabard mind, she added. Marie can empathize. Her former husband was the same, approaching his chores with apathy, constantly cutting corners, letting standards drop, not completing his rota and always playing catch-up. I put him in a pinny and frock which did help him focus, but after a couple of months, he just upped sticks and left us, she said. He's currently in Dunstable on the CWP, which means he doesn't even pay maintenance, let alone get in touch with the kids. Some men just don't have what it takes. Francine said. I suppose I'm lucky with Frank, he's not ideal but he's the best I've got, she smiled. A brief silence ensued. They drained their wine glasses. Would you like a refill? Marie offered. Oh yes please. Charlie. Marie said. The boy stepped forward and topped up their glasses. I'd forgotten he was stood there. Francine chuckled. A good servant should be neither seen nor heard. Marie proudly stated. She tells Francine that she'd found a PDF of an old servant's manual online, dating from around 1900. It's full of little sayings like that, she smiled, not that I see Charlie as a servant. She added, claiming she's merely teaching him how to serve when there's guests. I must say it is nice having my glass topped up for me. Francine commented. The article suggested that he's actually studying housekeeping. I wasn't sure if that was just spin or... Marie nodded and grabbed the folder containing the fact sheets she'd prepared over the last 8 months. Charles has been working through these, she says, removing them. Are they in order, Charlie? Yes, mother, he replied. Marie talked Francine through the paperwork, which explains things like why a home should be clean from top to bottom rather than bottom to top, various ways of getting a streak-free shine on windows and mirrors, polishing wood and dealing with marks and scratches, removing stains from textiles, simple sewing and darning techniques, and all sorts of other subjects. Rather than just telling him what, how and when, Charlie's been studying these and working it out for himself. You must be very proud of him. Francine said. I am, but more importantly, Charlie's very proud of himself. The house is always clean, the laundry's always done, he lays the breakfast table, prepares our packed lunches. Yes, it's all in the article. Francine said. Michael's able to keep his own room relatively tidy and sometimes helps his father with the washing up, but what I'd like is for him to have the ability to do everything as efficiently as Charles seems to do. Well, you're welcome to copies of these if you want, Marie said. And there should be some assignments somewhere too, she added, before asking Charlie. They're in a separate folder in his room and he's asked to fetch them. Yes, mother, he replied. Francine's eyes followed him as he left. She smiled at the big perfect bow hanging from the back of his traditional white apron. I figured you were a mum rather than a mother. Francine said. I am usually, but I feel mother is more appropriate when I'm entertaining guests. Marie replied. Francine agreed and commented on his apron, wondering where one buys such a traditionally styled garment. You can get them online, but Charlie made his. Really? Marie nodded proudly. She'd found a vintage sewing pattern on Etsy and dusted off her sewing machine. The fabric came from an old tablecloth, and following his mother's guiding hand, he learned to mark, cut, tack, pin and sew. He'd made the apron during the summer holidays as a rainy day project. His mother told him that sewing is an essential skill and an apron is a good beginner's garment. It's simple and features several useful techniques, cutting and sewing long straight hems as well as a neat uniform curve, flat stitches and ruched stitches, sewing the pocket, adding trim, etc. She hinted that she might wear it whilst making supper, so Charles suspected nothing until the garment was complete. I didn't let on that he was making his own apron until it was finished. He was so proud of himself, she recalled. Of course he was a bit hesitant when I gave him his frock, but I managed to convince him that a proper uniform will help him focus. And did it? Francine asked. I certainly think so. Marie replied. But it's one of those never-ending debates. It was on Women's Hour again only last week. Yes, I caught the tail end of that. I keep meaning to get the podcast so I can listen properly. Charles returned with a folder and placed it on the table before returning to his position by the door. His mother didn't thank him. In fact, she barely looked up when he delivered the folder to her. She continued talking to Francine about the benefits of a proper, domestic attire before showing her the essays that Charles had written in response to the assignments she'd set. "Oh, now I see," Francine exclaimed. "His handwriting's very neat," she commented as she read his 500 words on attaining a streak-free shine on windows and mirrors. It details a variety of methods including dedicated glass cleaners, just water and vinegar, as well as whether newspaper, a microfiber cloth or squeegee is best. It appears that Charles has tried all the methods and concludes that the method that works best is any of them, providing they're done often. "How often do you clean the windows, Charles?" Francine asked. She's somewhat taken aback to be told that he cleans the insides twice a week and the outside once a fortnight. "Even the upstairs windows?" "Yes, Mrs. Peters," he politely replied. Her eyes dropped to his feet and the sturdy 3-inch heels strapped around them. "In those shoes?" His mother replied on his behalf and tells Francine that he wears deck shoes when using a ladder. "Health and safety is paramount," she added. After some 90 minutes and a bottle of wine, Francine was satisfied that she has plenty to think about and bid Marie farewell. Peter tidied the dining room before asking his mother if he could change out of his uniform. She glanced at the clock. "You can, but there's probably no point at this time," she replied.